She woke up before the sun, as she did every day, her small hands moving quietly in the dim light of the kitchen. The house was still, the faint hum of the city outside barely audible. Her mother had already left for work, cleaning houses in the nearby neighborhood, leaving the girl to make breakfast for herself. Despite her young age, she was careful and thoughtful, moving with a rhythm that came from years of helping and observing, learning from her mother. She boiled water for tea, prepared simple bread, and packed a small bag with fruits and a few homemade snacks. Today, like every day, she had a mission that went beyond her own household chores. Walking down the narrow streets of the neighborhood, the early morning air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of damp earth and cooking fires. She had grown up in this place, and every corner felt familiar. Children ran past her, chasing imaginary dragons and laughing loudly, while shopkeepers began arranging their stalls. Most of them paid no attention to her, and that was fine. She didn't need recognition or praise. Her purpose was simple: to help an old man who lived alone at the far end of the street, a man who had become part of her daily life without anyone else noticing. The old man's house was small, almost hidden behind a cluster of aging buildings. Its walls were cracked in places, and the paint had faded from years of sun and rain. A small garden, overgrown with weeds, hinted at a past when someone had cared for it lovingly. She knocked softly on the wooden door, the sound echoing in the quiet morning. A moment later, the door opened slowly, revealing the old man with his frail figure and kind eyes, lined with the deep marks of age and experience. His white hair was thin and carefully combed, his clothes simple and neat. He smiled gently when he saw her, a smile that carried warmth and relief, the kind of relief that comes from knowing someone genuinely cares. "Good morning," she said softly, stepping inside. The house smelled faintly of old books and tea, a comforting mixture that reminded her of quiet afternoons spent reading. The old man moved slowly to his chair by the window, and she helped him settle in. She handed him a cup of warm tea and watched as he sipped carefully, his hands trembling slightly. They didn't speak much at first. Words were not always necessary between them. Her presence alone brought comfort, and the old man seemed to draw strength from it. She cleaned the small kitchen while he rested, preparing simple meals that were healthy and easy for him to digest. Sometimes she would read aloud from newspapers or letters, keeping him informed of the world outside, sharing stories that might have gone unnoticed in his solitary life. Despite her young age, she had a patience and understanding that seemed beyond her years. She noticed small details, when his hands shook more than usual, when his steps were slower, when his eyes carried a shadow of fatigue. She learned to anticipate his needs, to bring things before he asked, to offer help in silence. Her kindness was quiet but constant, the kind that builds trust not through words, but through action. Neighbors occasionally passed by and noticed her walking to the old man's house every morning. Some whispered about it, wondering why a young girl would spend so much time with someone she barely knew. But she never explained. She didn't need validation. Her reward was the smile on his face, the gratitude that shone in his eyes, the moments when he would say softly, "You are a good girl." That simple acknowledgement meant more to her than any gift or praise could. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Her routine remained unchanged. Every morning, she rose early, prepared for the day, and made her way to the old man's home. She carried with her a sense of purpose, though she did not fully understand its weight. To her, helping him was natural, something she did without question. Yet, the small gestures of kindness she performed daily began to weave a bond between them, one that neither fully understood but both felt deeply. The old man had lived in that house for decades, long before she was born. Few people knew much about him, and even fewer visited. Some said he had a family who had moved far away. Others claimed he had once been a teacher or a scholar. He never spoke about his past, and she never pressed him. The mystery surrounding him only added to her curiosity, though her curiosity was gentle, respectful. She wanted to help, not pry. One rainy afternoon, as she helped him carry groceries inside, he paused and looked at her with a strange intensity. "You remind me of someone," he said, his voice soft but deliberate. someone who had a sense of discipline and courage, even when young. She smiled politely, unsure how to respond, thinking perhaps he was simply reminiscing about old memories. Yet, something in his eyes suggested a depth she couldn't yet comprehend. As the days passed, she noticed small habits of his that hinted at a life of structure and routine. His furniture was arranged with meticulous care. His books and papers were neatly stacked. His movements, though slow, were precise. She began to wonder who he really was and what stories lay hidden behind his quiet demeanor. But she also understood that some stories are shared only when the time is right. Her role was to be present, to assist, to offer comfort. That was enough. There were moments of levity too. On sunny afternoons, they would sit by the window and watch the world go by. Birds chirped in the nearby trees, children played in the streets, and the sounds of the city created a gentle background music to their small routines. She would laugh at his quiet jokes, and he would smile at her innocence and patience. It was a simple life, yet rich in moments that often go unnoticed by the world. Her mother sometimes expressed concern, worrying that she spent too much time with someone who was not part of their family. But the girl would shake her head gently. "I am helping him," she would say. "He needs someone, and I can be that person." Her mother eventually stopped arguing, realizing that her daughter had a rare compassion that could not be taught or forced. One day, the old man asked her to help him with something unusual. He handed her an old, worn notebook, filled with careful handwriting and notes that seemed to span decades. "These are my memories," he said. "I want you to keep them safe." She felt the weight of the request, understanding the trust he placed in her. She nodded solemnly, accepting the responsibility without hesitation. It was not only the tasks she performed that mattered. It was the consistency, the reliability, and the genuine care she provided. The old man grew to depend on her presence, not just for practical help, but for emotional support. She listened to him, offered gentle advice when asked, and shared small stories of her own life to make him feel connected to the world beyond his walls. Through all of this, the girl remained humble. She never sought recognition, never expected gifts or rewards. Her joy came from seeing him comfortable, from knowing she had made even a small difference in his life. And in return, the old man offered wisdom, stories, and a sense of history that enriched her understanding of life, respect, and quiet courage. The neighborhood continued its usual rhythm, oblivious to the bond forming in the old man's home. But inside, a story was unfolding, a story of compassion, trust, and the extraordinary power of small, consistent acts of kindness. The girl did not realize it yet, but her daily visits were changing both their lives, creating a connection that would soon attract attention beyond the quiet streets they called home. As evening fell, she would pack her bag, help him settle for the night, and walk back home under the fading light. The streets were quiet again, the city slowly winding down. She felt a sense of fulfillment, a quiet satisfaction that came from knowing she had done what was right. And she would return the next morning, just as she had every day, ready to continue her routine, unaware that the world outside was beginning to notice the extraordinary heart she carried. Her journey had only just begun. Each day, each visit, each small act of care was a thread in a larger tapestry that neither she nor the old man fully understood. And though nothing in her world had changed outwardly, the invisible bond they shared was growing stronger, setting the stage for a moment that would soon bring unexpected visitors, revelations, and a recognition that the simplest acts of kindness can create the most profound impact. Days passed quietly, but the connection between the girl and the old man grew deeper. Each morning, she followed her usual routine, waking early, preparing breakfast, and walking through the streets toward his small house. But now, there was something more subtle in their interactions, a rhythm that spoke of trust and understanding. She knew when he wanted to talk, when he preferred silence, and when a gentle gesture was enough to comfort him. The old man, for his part, had begun to share small pieces of himself. Not grand stories or dramatic events, but little lessons and observations that seemed ordinary yet carried weight. He would tell her how he used to organize his day meticulously, how small habits could make a person stronger, how patience could sometimes do more than force. She listened carefully, absorbing everything, and sometimes practicing what he taught her in her own life. One afternoon, as she helped him sort through some old papers, she noticed how his hands shook more than usual. She reached out instinctively to steady him, and he looked at her with a faint smile, as if to say, "You see more than I show." She felt a warmth inside her chest, a sense that she mattered in ways she had never imagined. These moments, though small, became precious. She began to see that kindness, when given consistently, could create bonds stronger than many words could describe. Over time, she noticed the old man had habits that seemed unusual to someone outside his life. He would straighten the furniture meticulously, arrange his books in a certain order, and sometimes perform small exercises that looked like stretches or balance drills. She asked him once why he did these things, and he simply said, "Discipline keeps the mind and body ready. You never know when it will be needed." She nodded, not fully understanding, but appreciating the care he put into every action. Her curiosity grew quietly. Who had he been before this quiet life? What had brought him to this small, unassuming house? The neighborhood had its guesses. Some thought he was a retired teacher, others a clerk, and a few whispered that he might have been someone important in government. But no one truly knew, and he did not reveal much. The mystery intrigued her, but she respected his privacy. She was there to help, not to interrogate. One rainy morning, as the drops tapped lightly against the windows, she noticed that he seemed particularly tired. His breathing was slower, and his movements lacked their usual precision. She helped him sit down carefully, adjusted his chair, and handed him tea. He smiled weakly, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. "You are learning fast," he said quietly. "Faster than most who have crossed my path." She felt a surge of pride, though she tried to hide it. Compliments were rare in her life, and she had learned to accept them with humility. As weeks turned into months, their bond strengthened. She began to anticipate his needs without prompting. She would prepare meals suited to his health, remind him to take medicine, and even clean small areas that he could no longer reach easily. She found joy in these small acts, seeing them as part of a larger purpose she did not fully understand. In return, the old man offered wisdom and encouragement, often speaking in quiet, thoughtful phrases that lingered long after he had said them. One afternoon, she noticed an old photograph lying on a table. It was black and white, faded at the edges, showing a younger version of the old man in uniform, standing tall and proud. She picked it up carefully, her fingers tracing the image. "Was this you?" she asked softly. He nodded, his eyes distant, as if seeing something far away. "A long time ago," he said, "before life became quiet, before I learned the value of peace in simple moments." She sensed there was much more behind the photograph, stories he would never fully tell, but she did not press. Some truths, she understood, must be discovered in their own time. The old man occasionally shared small exercises with her, teaching her how to walk steadily, how to hold herself upright, how to observe details others might miss. She learned to notice the subtle sway of a branch in the wind, the change in a person's expression when they were uneasy, the small things that often went unnoticed. These lessons seemed trivial at first, but gradually, she realized they were shaping her in ways she could not yet name. Her presence became essential in his daily life. He began relying on her not just for practical help, but for companionship. He would ask her about her day, about small events in her life, and even about her dreams for the future. She shared little, partly out of habit, partly because she had never considered her life interesting enough to be worthy of attention. But he listened attentively, nodding and smiling, and in those moments, she felt seen, valued, and important. Neighbors continued to watch her with quiet curiosity. They noticed her regular visits, the careful way she tended to the old man, and they whispered among themselves. Some admired her, some wondered why she spent so much time away from her own household responsibilities. But she never explained herself. Her life had a rhythm, a purpose she understood fully, and she did not need the approval of others. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room. The old man spoke in a tone heavier than usual. "You know," he said slowly, "most people see only what they want to see. They do not notice kindness unless it is loud or rewarded. You have given me something rare. You have given me consistency, care, and respect. That is worth more than anything else." She felt a lump in her throat, unsure how to respond. She simply nodded and continued to make sure he was comfortable. Life continued in this quiet rhythm. She visited every day, helping him bathe, prepare meals, read letters, and sometimes simply sit together in silence. Their connection was built not on words, but on trust, understanding, and shared moments that carried weight far beyond their simplicity. She noticed small changes in his demeanor, moments of fatigue, brief flashes of memory, and occasional slips in conversation, but she remained patient, adapting to each day as it came. One rainy afternoon, while helping him adjust a blanket, he looked at her with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "You have a sharp mind," he said. "You notice more than most. You learn quickly. I wonder if you know what you are capable of." She smiled politely, unsure how to respond. She had never considered herself special, only responsible. Yet his words lingered in her mind, planting a seed of possibility she could not yet name. She began to see that the old man's lessons extended beyond daily tasks. He was teaching her patience, observation, empathy, and quiet strength. She learned to anticipate needs, to read small cues, and to act without expectation of reward. She learned that kindness, when consistent, could create bonds stronger than many words or grand gestures. And she learned, in subtle ways, that her actions mattered deeply to someone who had lived a long and full life. Over time, she noticed more unusual things about his habits. Sometimes he would pace slowly, checking windows and doors, muttering to himself in a low voice. Other times he would examine small objects, coins or papers, as if assessing their importance. She asked him once why he did these things, and he replied simply, "Life teaches you to pay attention to details. The small things matter more than you think." She took this to heart, realizing that her quiet observations had value, even if the world outside did not recognize them. Her daily visits became a sanctuary for both of them. She found comfort in the routine, in the knowledge that she was making a difference. He found solace in her presence, in her unwavering support and care. And though the outside world continued its usual pace, oblivious to the quiet bond forming in the old man's home, the two of them shared moments of profound connection that would shape their lives in ways neither could yet imagine. Sometimes, neighbors would catch glimpses of her helping him outside, carrying groceries or assisting him to the chair. They whispered among themselves, some impressed, others skeptical. But she paid little attention. The old man's gratitude, expressed in small words or fleeting smiles, was all the acknowledgement she needed. She understood that the value of her efforts lay not in public recognition, but in the quiet comfort she provided to someone who needed it most. Then, one day, she discovered a small, locked drawer in his desk. Curiosity overcame her for a moment, and she gently asked him about it. He smiled, a mixture of amusement and pride in his eyes. "One day you may understand why I kept these things. For now, it is enough that you are here, helping me, and learning what kindness truly means." She nodded, feeling the weight of his trust and the unspoken lessons hidden within that drawer. Life continued in this gentle rhythm. Morning visits, meals, small exercises, reading letters, and quiet companionship filled her days. She never asked for more, never expected anything in return. Yet each day, each interaction, subtly shaped her character, instilling patience, understanding, and a quiet confidence she had never known before. And though nothing extraordinary seemed to happen outwardly, the world beyond their walls had begun to notice something remarkable. The steady, unwavering kindness of a young girl who had chosen to dedicate her time, energy, and heart to someone who needed her. Little did she know that this quiet devotion would soon draw attention beyond the neighborhood, leading to a revelation that would change the course of her life forever. The days had begun to feel longer in a quiet, meaningful way. Each morning, She rose with the same sense of purpose, walking the familiar streets toward the old man's house. The city was waking around her, but for her, the moments inside his small home were the ones that mattered most. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and cooking fires, familiar and comforting. She had come to love these small routines, the early morning walk, the soft creak of the old wooden door, the quiet greeting exchanged with the man who had become more than just a neighbor. It was on one particularly bright morning that something unusual happened. She arrived as always, carrying a small bag of fresh bread and fruits, and found the old man already sitting in his chair by the window. His hands rested on the arms of the chair, and his gaze was distant, staring out at the street as if lost in thought. She sensed a change in him, a subtle weight in the way he held himself, and instinctively stepped closer to offer support. "Good morning," she said softly, placing the bag on the small table beside him. He looked at her and smiled faintly, but there was a hint of something unspoken in his eyes. "Good morning," he replied, his voice quieter than usual. She helped him adjust his blanket and handed him a cup of warm tea, noticing the slight tremor in his hands as he reached for it. After a few moments of silence, he spoke, his tone carrying a weight she had not heard before. "I want to show you something today," he said, motioning toward a small cabinet in the corner of the room. She followed him, curious, as he carefully opened the cabinet doors. Inside were stacks of documents, old photographs, medals, and a few small boxes tied with string. She could feel her heart quicken, sensing that what she was about to see was different from the quiet routines they had shared so far. "These," he said, pointing to the items, "are pieces of a life I have mostly kept hidden. Few people know, and I have chosen to live quietly for many years." She looked at the photographs first. They showed a younger version of him, standing tall in a uniform, sharp and proud, surrounded by groups of men who seemed disciplined and organized. Her eyes widened. "Were you in the military?" she asked softly. He nodded, his gaze distant, as if seeing memories she could not yet imagine. "Yes," he said quietly. "A long time ago, I served in ways that required discipline, focus, and a kind of strength that is hard to explain. But those days are behind me now. This house, these routines, and your visits, they are my world today." She felt a mixture of awe and humility. The man she had known as quiet and gentle had a past full of significance, courage, and experience she could barely begin to understand. He handed her a small box, tied neatly with string. Inside were medals and badges, each one carefully preserved. "These are reminders of service," he explained. "They represent moments of choice, responsibility, and sometimes sacrifice. You may not understand their full meaning, but I want you to see them because they are part of who I am." She held the items gently, feeling the weight of their history and the care with which they had been preserved. As she looked at the medals, she noticed a pattern in his life that mirrored the lessons he had been quietly teaching her. Discipline, observation, patience, kindness. These were not just habits for survival. They were principles he had lived by, principles that he had begun to pass on to her without ever saying so outright. She realized that her daily visits were not just acts of assistance. They were part of a deeper exchange, a quiet mentorship that was shaping her character in ways she had only begun to notice. He then took out a faded notebook, its pages filled with careful, meticulous handwriting. "These are my memories," he said. "Not all of them are happy. Some are difficult to revisit. But they are honest, and I trust you to respect them." She accepted the notebook with both hands, sensing the gravity of his trust. It was not just about helping him physically anymore. She was now part of the preservation of his life story, a role that humbled her. For hours that day, they went through the contents of the cabinet together. He shared small anecdotes, brief glimpses of moments that revealed the discipline, courage, and careful planning that had defined his life. He spoke of responsibility, leadership, and the importance of maintaining integrity even when no one is watching. She listened intently, absorbing the lessons and feeling the weight of the life he had led. Each story, each detail, added depth to the man she had always seen as gentle but ordinary. Over the following days, she noticed that he had begun to rely on her in new ways. He would ask her opinion on small matters like which books to keep on the shelves or how to organize his papers. He seemed to trust her judgment, and she approached these tasks with care, understanding that her role now carried more responsibility than ever before. It was no longer just about physical assistance. She was becoming a companion, a confidant, and a steward of his history. One afternoon, as she helped him water the small, overgrown garden outside, he spoke in a tone that was both gentle and reflective. "You have a keen eye," he said. "You notice details others often overlook. That skill will serve you well, not just here, but in life. Remember that small actions, when done consistently, can have a greater impact than grand gestures." She nodded, taking his words to heart, feeling that her ordinary acts of care were becoming extraordinary in ways she had not realized. Their bond continued to grow, not through dramatic events, but through quiet, consistent moments. She learned to anticipate his needs before he spoke, to understand his moods through subtle cues, and to offer comfort with a touch or a simple word. He, in turn, offered wisdom that went beyond words, lessons in patience, observation, humility, and the quiet power of kindness. She felt honored to be part of this exchange, though she never imagined it could lead to anything beyond their small world. One day, she noticed that he seemed unusually tired. His hands shook more than usual, and his steps were slower. She helped him sit in his chair, adjusted his blanket, and handed him tea. He smiled faintly and said, "You have become essential to my days, more than you realize. Your presence gives me comfort and steadiness." She felt a warmth spread through her chest, realizing that her dedication, though unnoticed by most, mattered deeply to someone who had lived a full, remarkable life. Curiosity continued to linger in her mind. Who had he been before this quiet life? What experiences had shaped him into the person he was now? She sometimes asked small, gentle questions, but he deflected most of them, preferring to share lessons rather than stories. She understood that some histories are not shared in full. They are revealed slowly, in moments of trust and understanding. She accepted this, knowing that her role was to observe, learn, and assist. Then came a day when she found him struggling to reach a stack of papers on a high shelf. She quickly moved to help, steadying him and handing the papers down. As she did, he looked at her with an intensity she had not seen before. "You remind me of someone I trained long ago," he said quietly. "Someone who had courage, intelligence, and a quiet strength. You have those qualities too, even if you do not realize it yet." She felt a mixture of surprise and humility, unsure how to respond. She had always seen herself as a helper, not someone remarkable. Yet his words lingered in her mind, planting a seed of possibility she could not yet name. Their daily routines continued, filled with small tasks, gentle conversation, and moments of shared reflection. She began to notice subtle changes in herself, greater patience, sharper observation, and a growing sense of confidence. She realized that the old man's lessons were not just about his past or their shared routines. They were shaping her future, preparing her for experiences she could not yet foresee. Neighbors occasionally observed her visits, sometimes with curiosity, sometimes with admiration. They whispered among themselves, noting her dedication and the unusual bond she shared with the old man. Some speculated about his identity, wondering who he had been and why a young girl spent so much time helping him. But she paid little attention. She had long understood that the value of her actions was not measured by the opinions of others, but by the impact they had on those she cared for. One evening, as the sun cast long shadows across the room, the old man spoke in a serious, reflective tone. "You have a rare quality," he said. "Consistency, patience, and kindness are not common. You have given me something far more valuable than any wealth or recognition, the assurance that someone cares without expecting anything in return. That is the essence of trust, and it is a gift I will always remember." She felt a lump in her throat, overwhelmed by the weight of his words and the depth of his gratitude. Over the following weeks, she noticed more evidence of his past life. He sometimes performed small exercises with precision, reviewed documents with care, and displayed a level of discipline that suggested training far beyond ordinary civilian life. She began to sense that the man she had known as gentle and quiet had once been someone remarkable, someone who had carried great responsibility and skill. Yet he remained humble, living simply, and placing his trust in her without fanfare or expectation. Their bond deepened, rooted in quiet acts of care and shared understanding. She began to see that her daily visits were not just about helping him survive but about honoring his life, preserving his dignity, and learning from his experiences. She realized that true impact often comes from consistency and presence, not from grand gestures or recognition. And so, life continued in its quiet, meaningful rhythm. She arrived each morning, performed her tasks with care, and absorbed the lessons he imparted through actions, words, and subtle guidance. Each day brought new insights, new moments of trust, and new layers of understanding. The old man's past remained partly a mystery, but she had come to appreciate the essence of who he was. Disciplined, wise, patient, and profoundly human. Little did she know that the depth of their bond, forged through months of quiet dedication, was preparing her for a moment that would bring unexpected visitors, revelations, and recognition that her simple acts of kindness had far-reaching consequences beyond anything she had imagined. The morning started like any other. She woke up early, her movements quiet so as not to disturb her mother, who had already left for work. She packed a small bag with fruits, bread, and a few other essentials, and stepped out into the cool air of the city streets. The day was bright, and the sun cast a golden glow on the worn buildings. Birds chirped in the distance, and the faint smell of fresh bread from nearby shops drifted toward her. She took her usual route, familiar and comforting, but today, there was a strange tension in the air she could not explain. When she reached the old man's house, she noticed that the front door was slightly ajar. That was unusual. He was usually very careful about keeping it closed. Her heart skipped a beat, but she reminded herself to stay calm. She knocked gently and called out softly, "Good morning." There was no immediate response. She stepped inside, her footsteps quiet on the wooden floor. The house seemed still, almost too still, and a shiver of unease ran down her spine. "Grandfather?" she called out softly. He appeared from the back of the room, standing in his usual chair by the window, but something was different. His expression was serious, almost tense, and his eyes were fixed on the street outside. She followed his gaze and saw an unusual sight. Men in uniforms, their posture rigid, moving purposefully toward the building. Her breath caught in her throat. 5 military officers, accompanied by a man whose presence demanded attention, were walking steadily toward the old man's house. Before she could react, the old man spoke in a calm but firm voice. "Stay where you are," he said. "They are here for a reason. Do not be afraid." She froze for a moment, unsure what to do. Fear and curiosity battled inside her, but she trusted him. He had always guided her, and his confidence, even in this tense moment, gave her a small sense of reassurance. The officers arrived at the door and knocked firmly. The sound echoed through the quiet street. The old man moved slowly to open the door, and the girl stepped back, feeling a mixture of anxiety and awe. The man leading them, a high-ranking general, spoke with authority, his voice carrying clearly even in the open air. "We are here to see you," he said. There was no anger or threat in his tone, only respect and determination. The girl realized immediately that this was no ordinary visit. The old man invited them inside, and they followed him into the small living room. The girl stayed near the corner, her eyes wide as she took in the sight of the officers. They were disciplined, professional, and moved with a precision that suggested they were accustomed to following orders without question. The general's gaze swept the room quickly, assessing everything with sharp attention, but then softened as it fell on her. She felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. Why were they here, and why did they notice her? The old man spoke quietly, his voice carrying calm authority. "These are friends from my past. They have come to honor someone they believe deserves recognition." She did not understand immediately, but she felt the weight of his words. He turned to her, a faint smile on his face. You have been a constant in my life when few others were. Today, they are here to acknowledge that. Her heart raced. Recognition had never been her goal. She had never sought praise, yet the idea that her daily visits mattered enough to draw attention from people in uniform left her both nervous and humbled. The general stepped forward, removing his cap as a sign of respect. We have come because the old man asked us to, he said. He speaks highly of a young girl who has shown him daily kindness, loyalty, and respect. We are here to see her and to understand the impact of her actions. She swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. All her life, she had believed that small acts of kindness were invisible, unnoticed by the larger world. And yet, here they were, military officers standing before her, listening and observing her in a way that made her feel both important and nervous. The old man gestured for her to come closer. Hesitantly, she stepped forward, feeling the eyes of the officers on her. This is the girl I have spoken about, he said proudly. She has helped me in ways that words cannot describe. She has been patient, consistent, and genuinely kind without expecting anything in return. The officers nodded, some smiling, some silent, but all respectful. The girl could feel the weight of their presence, the unspoken acknowledgement of the years she had spent quietly assisting him. The general spoke again, his tone deliberate and serious. We wanted to witness firsthand the person he has relied on. It is rare to find such dedication and humility, especially in someone so young. We are here to honor her in the way she deserves. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, overwhelmed by emotions she could not easily describe. She had never imagined that her daily efforts, acts that had seemed ordinary to her, could be seen as extraordinary by people she had only heard about in stories. The officers moved closer, examining the medals and documents the old man had shown her in the past. They nodded appreciatively at the evidence of his history, but then their attention returned to her. One of them, a man with a kind expression and eyes that seemed to see deeply, spoke. You have done something remarkable. To give your time, energy, and heart without expecting reward is a rare quality. The old man is fortunate to have had you by his side. She felt a blush rise to her cheeks, unused to receiving praise, especially from strangers of such authority. The old man smiled, a quiet pride shining in his eyes. She has taught me something as well, he said. Even in my quiet life, when I believed no one truly noticed me, she came every day. Her presence reminded me that even small acts of kindness matter. That consistency and care create bonds stronger than any achievement or rank. The girl felt a deep warmth in her chest, realizing that the old man had not only acknowledged her efforts, but had also understood their deeper significance. The general stepped closer, producing a small envelope. The old man requested that we deliver this to you, he said, handing it gently to her. Her hands trembled slightly as she took it, feeling the weight of its importance. She opened it carefully and found a letter inside. It spoke of gratitude, recognition, and a small token of support for her future. It was a gesture of acknowledgement she had never expected, yet it felt natural, fitting, and profoundly moving. As the morning light shifted through the windows, the officers began to prepare to leave. The girl realized that the encounter, though brief, had changed something inside her. She had always believed her efforts were small, unseen, and perhaps insignificant. Yet here were men of authority, standing in her small world, recognizing the value of her dedication. She understood now that true kindness, consistency, and humility could create ripples far beyond what she imagined. Before they departed, the general turned to her once more. Remember this moment, he said. You have shown that heroism does not always wear a uniform. Sometimes, it is found in quiet acts, daily decisions, and the courage to care without expectation. Your actions matter more than you know. She nodded, tears spilling freely now, overwhelmed by the validation she had never sought but deeply needed. The old man guided her to the window, and they watched as the officers walked back down the street. The city continued its usual rhythm, oblivious to the extraordinary moment that had unfolded in the small house. Yet inside, a bond had been acknowledged. A life quietly lived had been recognized, and the girl's simple acts of compassion had been honored in a way she could never have imagined. She turned to the old man, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't do anything special," she said softly. "I just helped." He shook his head gently. "Helping is the most special thing anyone can do. Consistency, care, and love. These are the real achievements in life. You have given me more than you will ever know." She felt a sense of fulfillment unlike anything she had experienced. The fear, the uncertainty, and the quiet tension of the morning were replaced by warmth, pride, and understanding. That day, as she walked home under the late morning sun, her steps felt lighter. She understood, in a way she never had before, that her actions, small, daily, unnoticed by most, had meaning. The recognition from the general and the officers was extraordinary, yes, but the real impact was in the bond she had formed, the lives she had touched, and the lessons she had learned. She had grown stronger, wiser, and more confident in the quiet presence of someone who mattered deeply to her. When she reached home, her mother noticed the change immediately. There was a glow in her daughter's eyes, a confidence in her step, and an air of calm pride she had never seen before. She didn't need to ask questions. She could see that something profound had occurred, and in the small, unassuming house at the end of the street, the old man sat quietly, a faint smile on his face, knowing that the day had brought acknowledgement, understanding, and closure in a way neither of them could have imagined before. The quiet routine they had shared for months had led to a moment of recognition that would remain with her forever. She had started her journey thinking her efforts were small, inconsequential, and invisible. Yet through consistency, care, and compassion, she had touched a life deeply, earned the respect of men of authority, and discovered the extraordinary power of everyday kindness. And as she lay down that night, reflecting on the events of the day, she knew that her story was just beginning, and that the bond she had formed with the old man would continue to shape her life in ways yet unseen. The morning air was cool and gentle, carrying the soft sounds of the city waking up. Birds chirped in the distance, and the faint smell of fresh bread drifted from nearby shops. She moved through the streets with her usual calm purpose, her bag light but steady on her shoulder. After the extraordinary events of the previous day, her mind felt restless yet full. She had witnessed something remarkable, felt the warmth of acknowledgement, and yet, her heart wanted to return to the quiet rhythm that had always defined her mornings. The small routines she shared with the old man who had become her guide, teacher, and friend. As she reached the small house at the end of the street, she noticed the old man sitting by the window, gazing out at the street with a serene expression. The sunlight fell softly on his face, highlighting the faint lines of age and wisdom. When he saw her approach, his face lit up with a gentle smile, one that carried a deep sense of pride and gratitude. He gestured for her to come inside, and she stepped forward, feeling the familiar warmth of the small home that had been their shared sanctuary for months. "Good morning," she said softly, placing her bag down and arranging the few items she had brought. The old man nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a look that spoke volumes. Gratitude, admiration, and a quiet affection that went beyond words. There was a moment of stillness between them, a shared understanding that the previous day had changed something inside both of them. She had always known that her presence mattered, but now she could feel it, see it reflected in the old man's eyes, and sense it in the quiet strength that filled the room. He reached over and placed a small hand on hers. "You have done more than you realize," he said gently. "Not just for me, but for yourself. The lessons you have learned, the patience you have shown, the care you have given, they are a part of who you are becoming. Never underestimate the impact of what you do." She felt a lump in her throat. Her days had been filled with small acts, moments of simple assistance, and she had never imagined that they could shape her so deeply, that they could create ripples beyond her own understanding. As the morning passed, they went about their usual routines, but there was a new sense of lightness in their interactions. He asked her to help with small tasks around the house, organizing papers, arranging books, tending to the small garden that had grown wild over the years. She moved with care, her actions precise and deliberate, aware that each task carried meaning. She noticed the way he watched her, his eyes reflecting pride and quiet amazement. The old man's life had been full of discipline and structure, yet he had found beauty in her gentle presence, in the consistency of her care. Later in the day, there was a knock at the door, firm but respectful. She felt a flutter of curiosity and apprehension. The old man rose slowly, his expression calm but expectant. When he opened the door, she saw the familiar figures of the general and the military officers from the previous day. They stepped inside, their posture disciplined yet relaxed, their eyes kind and filled with respect. The girl felt a mixture of surprise and warmth. She had thought the acknowledgement from yesterday was complete, yet their return signaled something more, something deeper. The general approached her first, removing his cap in a gesture of respect. "We have come again," he said, his voice steady, "because the old man wished for us to express our gratitude personally, not only for the assistance you have provided, but for the extraordinary way you have cared, day after day, without expectation or hesitation. You have shown a strength of character that is rare, and we wanted to honor it properly." She felt tears welling in her eyes, unable to find the right words. Recognition had never been her goal, yet here it was, tangible and sincere, reflecting the value of her quiet dedication. The officers moved around the small living room, their eyes scanning the carefully preserved documents, medals, and photographs that spoke of the old man's remarkable past. They nodded to each other, exchanged quiet words, but their attention always returned to her. "You have been part of something greater than you know," one of them said gently. "Your presence, your care, and your unwavering commitment have allowed this man to live with dignity and comfort. That is not something many can achieve." She felt her heart swell. The words were not empty praise. They carried truth, acknowledgement of the sacrifices she had made, and the daily effort she had invested without ever seeking reward. The old man gestured for her to come closer, and she moved hesitantly, unsure of what to expect. "This girl," he said, his voice filled with pride, "has given me more than anyone else has in years. She has reminded me that kindness, patience, and compassion are more powerful than any achievement, rank, or recognition. She has restored my faith in the small, meaningful acts that define life. Today, I ask that you understand the importance of what she has done." The general nodded solemnly. "We understand," he said, "and we are here to ensure that her efforts are recognized. It is rare to find someone who dedicates themselves so fully to another's well-being without expectation. We are honored to witness it and to express our gratitude in any way we can." One of the officers handed her a small envelope. She opened it carefully, revealing a letter and a small certificate of recognition from the old man and the military organization he had once served. Her hands trembled as she read the words, feeling the depth of their meaning. The letter spoke of gratitude, admiration, and acknowledgement of her unwavering dedication, and it included a small fund to support her education and future. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. All her life, she had thought that her small acts of care went unnoticed, that they were ordinary and insignificant. Yet here they were, tangible proof that her patience, kindness, and consistency mattered deeply. The old man smiled at her, a quiet, knowing smile that filled the room with warmth. "You have earned this not because you sought it, but because it was your nature to give. That is what makes it meaningful." Tears streamed down her face as she looked at the men who had come to honor her. She felt a mixture of humility, pride, and deep gratitude. She realized that her life, once so ordinary, had touched others in profound ways. The recognition was not just about her. It was about the bond she had formed with the old man, the trust she had earned, and the impact of her daily, quiet acts of kindness. She had learned that heroism was not always about grand gestures or fame. Sometimes, it was found in the consistency of love and care that no one else might notice. The old man spoke again, his voice soft but firm. "Remember, the value of your actions is not measured by recognition or reward. It is measured by the impact you have on others, the comfort you bring, and the strength you inspire. You have given me all of that, and more." She nodded, understanding fully for the first time the power of what she had done. The bond they had built over months of shared routines, trust, and quiet dedication had created something extraordinary, something that extended far beyond their small home. The officers remained for a while longer, sharing stories of the old man's past and listening to her experiences. They were kind, attentive, and respectful, yet there was no sense of ceremony or grandeur. It was not a performance. It was a genuine acknowledgement of the life she had quietly dedicated to caring for someone who had become central to her world. She felt seen, valued, and appreciated in a way that words could not fully capture. When they finally departed, leaving the envelope and the certificate behind, the girl sat quietly, absorbing the magnitude of the day's events. The old man placed a hand on hers, his eyes warm and proud. "This is just a small reflection of the truth," he said. "You have given me more than recognition can show. You have given me dignity, comfort, and the gift of human connection. That is priceless." She leaned her head gently against his shoulder, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment and love. In the days that followed, life returned to its quiet rhythm, but nothing was quite the same. She continued her visits, her care, and her small acts of kindness, but now she carried with her a new sense of confidence, purpose, and understanding. She knew that what she did mattered, that her presence could create ripples far beyond what she had imagined. And she knew that the bond she shared with the old man was a rare and precious gift, one that would shape her life forever. She also understood that recognition, though meaningful, was not the goal. The true reward had always been the connection, the trust, and the knowledge that her daily dedication had created comfort, joy, and dignity for someone who had become her guide and friend. The certificate and the letter were symbols, but the real significance lay in the lessons she had learned and the relationship she had built. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in warm shades of orange and pink, she helped the old man settle into his chair. He looked at her, eyes reflecting the fading light, and spoke softly. "You have changed my life, and in doing so, you have changed yourself. Remember this always. The quiet acts of kindness, the patience, and the care you offer are the truest forms of strength. You carry it in your heart, and it will guide you wherever life takes you." She nodded, feeling tears welling once again, overwhelmed by the love and wisdom that had been shared so freely. The months of small, unnoticed efforts had culminated in this profound understanding, the realization that the simplest acts, performed consistently and with genuine care, could create ripples of meaning far greater than anyone could anticipate. That night, she returned home with a heart full of gratitude, pride, and quiet joy. The streets were calm, the city lights twinkling softly, and the cool air carried the scent of home. She knew that life would continue, that challenges would arise, and that her path would not always be easy. Yet she also knew that the lessons she had learned, the bond she had forged, and the understanding she had gained would guide her through every step of her journey. In the days, months, and years that followed, she carried the memory of that extraordinary morning and the quiet recognition of her efforts. She continued to visit the old man, to assist him, to learn from him, and to share her own experiences. And though the world outside may never fully understand the significance of her actions, she knew in her heart that the impact of her kindness, patience, and devotion had created something timeless. A connection, a story, and a life profoundly touched by the simple, quiet power of human care. And so, the story closes not with fanfare or grandeur, but with a quiet understanding that true heroism, love, and value are found in the consistency of daily care, the trust built over months, and the acts of kindness that ripple far beyond what anyone can see. The girl, once humble and unaware of her impact, had become a beacon of compassion, proving that even the smallest, quietest efforts can change lives forever.